If you come home and find two intruders, one butterfly, one moth, do you treat both these intruders equally or differently? Now be honest. It's okay. We are all, as humans, programmed to view the butterfly more favorably than we do their moth counterparts, right? But why? Is one more valuable to us than the other? Or is it something else? Why is it that it is in our inherent instinctive nature to wish one a free life while being perfectly okay with terminating the life of the other? Now, that's a big question. I believe if our collective consciousness, beginning with the individual, that's you, starts wrapping your mind around this idea, and if you can commit yourself to changing that simply by treating them both equally. Now, does that mean we just start killing all butterflies because we have to treat them equally as the moths that we are instinctively programmed to hate for some reason? Well, that's one option. But the harder choice would be to make a conscious effort to treat both lives equally, in the sense where if you see a moth in your home, can you step out of yourself and say, I'm not going to kill this, I'm going to catch it and let it free? If you can do that, if you can save the lives of, let's say, 100 moths that you find in your home, I guarantee you will switch a different light of consciousness within your cognitive thinking that will be better, not only for the sake of, let's say, ending racism, but more getting closer to the true meaning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which teaches us the variable which is very much overlooked. And that variable is that God is love and love is God. And if you can show the same amount of love to all of God's creatures, starting with the moth and the butterfly, I guarantee you this world will become a much better place. Tell me what you think.
Dean, the view that everything is just the material, physical world, call it naturalism, materialism, physicalism, is a growing belief among many people, especially scientists. As a philosopher, how can you begin to analyze what this means?
Well, it has a lot of different components to it, I think. When you talk about naturalism, that can mean a lot of different things to different people. I think among philosophers, quite a lot of the discussion about, under the heading naturalism, is about something you could call physicalism. Physicalism because of the important role of physics in the doctrine. Physicalism as it's sometimes defined anyway, is the view that physics will play a sort of privileged role in describing reality. That there must be, at the end of the road, we're not there yet, obviously, a kind of true fundamental physics that would describe the way the matter in our bodies behaves and the matter in stars behaves, and describes all of that.
It's more than privileged. It is, in fact, complete, 100%. It's
right.
a total.
That's the privilege
okay.
that it has. That you can get exceptionless laws about this stuff, and once you've done that, once you've described it at that level, in some sense you've described everything. There's nothing you've left out. You're not going to find a need to posit any extra supernatural agents sort of poking around in the mix.
No God.
No God is needed to start it up or to keep it running or anything like that. Nudge it a little bit if it gets out of whack. I guess Newton thought that was good evidence for God's existence, that the orbits weren't quite stable, so he must be nudging them. So physicalism is the view that once you've done that describing, there's nothing left over. And the way philosophers often put the nothing left over is to say that everything else will supervene upon that. And by supervene, what they mean is something like everything else is determined by what goes on at that level. So if you have the final true physics and you describe the whole universe in terms of it, there's not a possible situation where things are different at any level. So, for instance, if you take our world and its physics, now there's wars that go on, right? Wars don't show up in physics, There's no difference between, cavalry and infantry. That's not a fundamental difference for physics. But if physicalism is true, then any world that's exactly like ours at this fundamental level is going to have wars, and it's going to have infantry, and it's going to have cavalry. They're not something extra that could be here, maybe not, and yet everything be the same.
Because it's all the product of these of huge numbers of particles and forces interacting from time immemorial
right.
in a sequence that have occurred in a deterministic way to produce the stuff that it has.
Deterministic or indeterministic.
Sure, with quantum mechanics, sure.
So, but in any case, the determination between the sort of fundamental level describable by physics and these other levels, social, biological, psychological, that determination is very strict. You couldn't have any of those things, any facts about those subjects being different without there being some difference on the level of the fundamental physics.
Right. So there are a couple of ways to understand then this concept. One is that there is the elimination of some things that many people think are important. Certainly the existence of a God or angelic realms or other spiritual things, all of that completely doesn't exist. And even on our own mentality, that our consciousness or souls are products of our brain and really don't have an independent existence. But then in addition to that, all these other aspects of the world, events and aspects of biology or right. psychology or sociology are all determined one way or another by this underlying physics and the physicalism of it.
Right. Yeah, and you might well wonder what justifies this, confidence in this
right.
picture, because it is a rather grand metaphysical scheme, really. That there is a level that's going to be fundamental in explaining everything, and it's like this.
After the failure of humanity in the use and control of the other forces of the universe that have turned against us, it is urgent that we nourish ourselves with another kind of energy. And what I will reveal now to transmit to mankind will also collide with the misunderstanding and prejudice in the world. When scientists look for a unified theory of the universe, they forget the most powerful unseen force. Love is power because it multiplies the best we have and allows humanity not to be extinguished in their blind selfishness. It is a force that includes and governs all others, and is even behind any phenomenon operating in the universe and has not yet been identified by us. Love is light that enlightens those who give and receive it. E equals mc squared. An extremely powerful force that, so far, science has not found a formal explanation to. If instead of E equals mc squared, we accept that the energy to heal the world can be obtained through love multiplied by the speed of light squared, we arrive at the conclusion that love is the most powerful force there is because it has no limits. Love is God, and God is love. To give visibility to love, he made a simple substitution in his most famous equation. This universal force is love. When Einstein proposed his theory of relativity, very few understood him. Love is God, and God is love. This is the variable that we have ignored for too long, maybe because we are afraid of love, because it is the only energy in the universe that man has not learned to drive at will. Perhaps we are not yet ready to make a bomb of love, a device powerful enough to entirely destroy the hate, selfishness, and greed that devastate the planet. However, each individual carries within them a small but powerful generator of love, whose energy is waiting to be released. Love is gravity because it makes some people feel attracted to others. If we want our species to survive, if we are to find meaning in life, if we want to save the world and every sentient being that inhabits it, love is the one and only answer. Love unfolds and reveals. For love, we live and we die. Love is God, and God is love. This force explains everything and gives meaning to life. When we learn to give and receive this universal energy, we will have affirmed that love conquers all, is able to transcend everything and anything, because love is the quintessence of life.
Right. There's no mentality there. There's not going to be any need to posit any mental entities of any kind at the most fundamental level. Why do we think that? How do we know that? There's a kind of methodological naturalism, which is very sensible to assume if you're a scientist studying anything in the empirical world.
Sure.
But this goes way beyond that. So it's one thing to say we should always look for natural explanations. We should always look for explanations that could in principle be realized in some kind of physical stuff without any kind of unnatural, supernatural pokings or proddings. It's another to say there aren't any, and we know this. In particular, the question of God, why connect the view that, say, wars, biology, psychology, the psychology of human beings anyway, that all of this stuff is determined by what goes on at the fundamental physical level? What's the connection between that view and the view that there's no God? It's not obvious. It might be thought that once you've got all of that explained by physics, there's no need to explain anything else. But
well, it's an a priori assumption, something that many people bring into the discussion.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I think that's right.
And the question is that a legitimate assumption? That only the physical is real as we define it?
And I think that all depends upon whether it's utterly implausible that there's a deity of some kind, or whether there's reason to believe that there might be one.
Well, and from the physicalist point of view, they would say you got it backwards. It's the wrong way to think about it. They say that we can explain everything that we have to do with the physical world, and some things that we haven't quite explained. We're making progress, and we're going to fill in all those holes later. And you're just throwing in some non-physical stuff because it makes you feel good.
Well, sometimes it doesn't make one feel good. So sometimes, it'd be easier if you were just sort of doing your own thing. But yeah, so does, in principle, physics-y explanations of things like wars and digestion and all these things, does that suggest that the existence of a universe of this complexity and of this sort needs no explanation?
Beyond the internal explanation
Right.
of how all things occur.
Right. Seems to me it calls out for some. Maybe it doesn't have any, but the idea of its having an explanation, of its being here for some reason, makes sense. And it's a question that I want on the table.